Activity. A component of work performed during the course of a project. Activity actual finish date. The point in time at which work actually ended on the schedule activity. Activity actual start date. The point in time at which work actually began on the schedule activity. Activity actual duration. The total number of work periods in calendar units between the activity actual start date of the schedule activity and either the date of the project schedule, if the schedule activity is in progress, or the activity actual finish date, if the schedule activity is complete. Activity attributes, output/input. Multiple attributes associated with each schedule activity that can be included within the activity list. Activity attributes include activity codes, predecessor activities, successor activities, logical relationships, leads and lags, resource requirements, imposed dates, constraints, and assumptions. Activity baseline finish date. The point in time associated with the completion of the schedule activity in an approved project schedule baseline. See also activity current finish date. Activity baseline duration. The total number of work periods in calendar units between the activity baseline start date and activity baseline finish date of a schedule activity is determined by its approved project schedule baseline. Activity baseline start date. The point in time associated with the beginning of the schedule activity in an approved project schedule baseline. See also activity current start date. Activity box. A graphic object used to display schedule activity data in accordance with schedule network logic. Activity calendar. Usually the project calendar, or another specifically defined calendar from the calendar library, assigned to the schedule activity which defines the work periods and non-work periods in calendar format. The activity calendar, on the schedule activities to which it is assigned, is used to replace the project calendar during schedule network analysis. See also calendar library. Activity code. One or more numerical or text values that identify characteristics of the work or in some way categorize the schedule activity that allows filtering and ordering of activities within reports. Activity cost estimate. The estimated cost of the schedule activity that includes the cost for all resources required to perform and complete the activity, including all cost types and cost components. Activity cumulative probability risk distribution. A table of dates and their associated cumulative probabilities of occurrence for schedule activity completion. Dates are derived using analytical techniques such as Monte Carlo calculations. When applied to the project end date, the value is equivalent to the project cumulative probability risk distribution. Activity current finish date. The current estimate of the point in time when the schedule activity will be completed, where the estimate reflects any reported work progress. See also activity scheduled finish date, activity baseline finish date, current finish date. Activity current start date. The current estimate of the point in time when the schedule activity will begin, where the estimate reflects any reported work progress. See also activity scheduled start date, activity baseline start date, and current start date. Activity description AD. A short phrase or label for each schedule activity, used in conjunction with an activity identifier to differentiate a project schedule activity from other schedule activities. The activity description normally identifies the scope of work of the schedule activity, sometimes also known as activity name or activity title. Activity definition, process. The process of identifying the specific schedule activities that need to be performed to produce the various project deliverables. Activity duration estimating, process. The process of estimating the number of work periods that will be needed to complete individual schedule activities. Activity duration. The total number of work periods, in calendar units, between the activity early start date and the activity early finish date of a schedule activity. See also duration, DU or DUR. Activity duration % complete. An estimate, expressed as the percentage that the activity actual duration is of the activity total duration for a schedule activity that has work in progress. Activity duration variance. A quantifiable deviation, departure, or divergence away from a given duration for a schedule activity. Activity expected finish date. A date constraint placed on both the activity early and late finish dates of an in-progress schedule activity that affects when the schedule activity can be scheduled for completion and is usually in the form of a fixed imposed date. This constraint requires the activity remaining duration to be set equal to the difference between the activity expected finish date and the data date to force the schedule activity to be scheduled to finish upon the imposed date. Activity early finish date. The earliest possible point in time when the uncompleted portion of the schedule activity can be completed. See also early finish date. Activity early start date. The earliest possible point in time when the schedule activity can begin. See also early start date. Activity finish date. A point in time associated with the completion of a schedule activity in a project. Usually qualified by one of the following: actual, baseline, current, early, expected, late, mandatory, scheduled, or target. See also finish date. Activity group. A project team member selected set of schedule activities, sharing some common activity attribute that allows the activities to be grouped and reported or displayed separately, such as being divided in a graphic display from other activities with a horizontal line. Activity identifier. A short unique numeric or text identification assigned to each schedule activity to differentiate that project activity from other activities. Typically unique within any one project schedule network diagram. Activity label. A short phrase or label for each schedule activity used in conjunction with an activity identifier to differentiate that project schedule activity from other schedule activities. The activity description normally describes the scope of work of the schedule activity. Activity late finish date. The latest possible point in time when the schedule activity can be completed without violating a schedule constraint or delaying the project end date. See also late finish date. Activity late start date. The latest possible point in time when the schedule activity can begin without violating a schedule constraint or delaying the project end date. See also late start date.
Activity list, output/input. A documented tabulation of schedule activities that shows the activity description, activity identifier, and a sufficiently detailed activity scope definition for the work so project team members understand what work is to be performed. The list may have additional activity attributes. Activity mandatory finish date. A finish date constraint placed on a schedule activity that sets both the activity early and late finish dates equal to a fixed imposed date and thereby also constrains the early start dates of the network paths logically following that schedule activity. Activity mandatory start date. A start date constraint placed on a schedule activity that sets both the activity early and late start dates equal to a fixed imposed date and thereby also constrains the late finish date of the network paths logically preceding that schedule activity. Activity original duration. The activity duration originally assigned to a schedule activity and not updated as progress is reported on the activity. Typically used for comparison with activity actual duration and activity remaining duration when reporting schedule progress. Normally developed by reliance on historic data, specialists, resource availability, financial considerations, and volume of work to be performed. May also be called planned duration. Activity physical percent complete. An estimate, expressed as a percent, of the amount of work that has been completed on a schedule activity, measured in terms of either physical work progress or by means of the earning rules of earned value management. Activity remaining duration. The total number of work periods in calendar units, A, equal to the original duration for an activity that has not started, or b. between the date of the project schedule and the early finish date of a schedule activity that has an activity actual start date. This represents the time needed to complete a schedule activity where the work is in progress. See also remaining duration. Activity resource estimating, process. The process of estimating the types and quantities of resources required to perform each schedule activity. Activity resource leveled finish date. The point in time associated with the activity scheduled finish date of a resource-limited schedule activity in a resource-limited schedule. Activity resource leveled start date. The point in time associated with the activity scheduled start date of a resource-limited schedule activity in a resource-limited schedule. Activity risk criticality index. The probability that the schedule activity will be on a critical path. Activity scheduled finish date. The point in time when work was scheduled to complete on a schedule activity. The activity schedule finish date is normally within the range of dates resource leveling of scarce resources. Sometimes called activity planned finish date. See also activity current finish date, scheduled finish date. Activity scheduled start date. The point in time when work was scheduled to begin on a schedule activity. The activity schedule start date is normally within the range of dates delimited by the activity early start date and the activity late start date. It may reflect resource leveling of scarce resources. Sometimes called activity plan start date. See also activity current start date, scheduled start date. Activity scope definition. Documented narrative describing the work represented by the activity. Activity sequencing, process. The process of identifying and documenting dependencies among schedule activities. Activity start date. A point in time associated with the beginning of the schedule activity in a project. Usually qualified by one of the following: actual, baseline, current, early, late, scheduled, or target. See also start date. Activity target date variance. A quantifiable deviation, departure, or divergence away from a known activity target start date or activity target finish date. Activity target duration. The estimated total number of work periods in calendar units, needed to complete the schedule activity as determined by a specific project target schedule. Activity target finish date. A point in time established by schedule network analysis for completion of a schedule activity within a specific version of the project schedule. Activity target start date. A point in time established by schedule network analysis for beginning the schedule activity within a specific version of the project schedule. Activity total duration. The total number of work periods in calendar units to complete a schedule activity. For schedule activities in progress, it includes the activity actual duration plus the activity remaining duration. Activity type. A categorization designation that differentiates the discrete schedule activities that have different functions within the schedule model, such as milestone, task, summary, level of effort, and dummy. Actual cost, AC. Total costs actually incurred and recorded in accomplishing work performed during a given time period for a schedule activity or work breakdown structure component. Actual cost can sometimes be direct labor hours alone, direct costs alone, or all costs including indirect costs. Also referred to as the actual cost of work performed, ACWP. See also, Earned Value Technique, EVT. Actual duration. The time in calendar units between the actual start date of the schedule activity and either the date of the project schedule if the schedule activity is in progress or the actual finish date if the schedule activity is complete. See also activity actual duration and project actual duration. Actual finish date. The point in time when work actually ended on a schedule activity. Note in some application areas, the schedule activity is considered finished when work is substantially complete. Actual start date, as the point in time when work actually started on a schedule activity. Application area. A category of projects that have common components significant in such projects, but are not needed or present in all projects. Application areas are usually defined in terms of either the product, that is, by similar technologies or production methods, or the type of customer, that is, internal versus external, government versus commercial, or industry sector, that is, utilities, automotive, aerospace, information technologies. Application areas can overlap. Approve. The act of formally confirming, sanctioning, ratifying, or agreeing to something. Arrow. The graphic presentation of a schedule activity and the arrow diagramming method or a logical relationship between schedule activities and the precedence diagramming method. Arrow diagramming method, ADM, technique. A schedule network diagramming technique in which schedule activities are represented by arrows. The tail of the arrow represents the start, and the head represents the finish of the schedule activity. The length of the arrow does not represent the expected duration of the schedule activity. Schedule activities are connected at points called nodes, usually drawn as small circles, to illustrate the sequence in which the schedule activities are expected to be performed. See also precedence diagramming method, PDM. Assumptions, output/input. Assumptions are factors that, for planning purposes, are considered to be true, real, or certain without proof or demonstration. Assumptions affect all aspects of project planning, and are part of the progressive elaboration of the project. Project teams frequently identify, document, and validate assumptions as part of their planning process. Assumptions generally involve a degree of risk. Author. The originator, publisher, or responsible party of a document, such as a schedule, estimate, or analysis. Backward pass. The calculation of late finish dates and late start dates for the uncompleted portions of all schedule activities. Determined by working backwards through the schedule network logic from the project's end date. The end date may be calculated in a forward pass or set by the customer or sponsor. Bar. A rectangular-shaped graphical display object used to represent the occurrence of a data component in a document, such as a schedule activity in a bar chart whose length is determined by the activity start and end dates corresponding to the timescale used for the bar chart. Bars can overlap or be displayed side by side to indicate progress or baselines. Bar chart, tool. A graphic display of schedule-related information. In the typical bar chart, schedule activities or work breakdown structure components are listed down the left side of the chart, dates are shown across the top, and activity durations are shown as date-placed horizontal bars. Also called a Gantt chart. Baseline. The approved time-phased plan, for a project, a work breakdown structure component, a work package, or a schedule activity, plus or minus approved project scope, cost, schedule, and technical changes. Generally refers to the current baseline, but may refer to the original or some other baseline. Usually used with a modifier, for example, cost baseline, schedule baseline, performance measurement baseline, technical baseline. See also performance measurement baseline. Baseline date. The date on which the current baseline was established. Sometimes used with a modifier such as project schedule, project scope, or project cost. Baseline duration. See activity baseline duration and project baseline duration baseline finish date. See activity baseline finish date and project baseline finish date baseline start date. See activity baseline start date and project baseline start date. Budget. The approved estimate for the project or any work breakdown structure component or any schedule activity. See also estimate. Calendar. A table or register of dates containing the days of each month and week in one or more years. In project management, each date may be identified as a time span for performing work, work period, or as a time span for not performing work including designated holidays, non-work period, and each date may be further subdivided into segments such as shifts, hours, or even minutes that may be designated as work periods or non-work periods. usually used with a modifier such as activity, fiscal year, Gregorian, project, program, or resource. Calendar library. A set of calendars that can be applied to the various schedule activities and resources. Calendar unit. The smallest unit of time used in scheduling the project. Calendar units are generally in hours, days, or weeks, but can also be in quarter years, months, shifts, or even in minutes. Change control. Identifying, documenting, approving or rejecting, and controlling changes to the project baseline. Component. A constituent part, element, or piece of a complex whole. Constraint, input. The state, quality, or sense of being restricted to a given course of action or inaction. An applicable restriction or limitation, either internal or external to the project, that will affect the performance of the project or a process. For example, a schedule constraint is any limitation or restraint placed on the project schedule that affects when a schedule activity can be scheduled and is usually in the form of fixed imposed dates. A cost constraint is any limitation or restraint placed on the project budget such as funds available over time. A project resource constraint is any limitation or restraint placed on resource usage, such as what resource skills or disciplines are available and the amount of a given resource available during a specified time frame. Control, technique. Comparing actual performance with planned performance, analyzing variances, assessing trends to affect process improvements, evaluating possible alternatives, and recommending appropriate corrective action as needed. Control account, CA, tool. A management control point where scope, budget, resource plans, actual cost, and schedule are integrated and compared to earned value for performance measurement. Control accounts are placed at selected management points, specific components at selected levels, of the work breakdown structure. Each control account may include one or more work packages, but each work package may be associated with only one control account. Each control account is associated with a specific single organizational component in the organizational breakdown structure, OBS. Previously called a cost account, see also work package. Corrective action. Documented direction for executing the project work to bring expected future performance of the project work in line with the project management plan. Cost. The monetary value or price of a project activity or component that includes the monetary worth of the resources required to perform and complete the activity or component, or to produce the component. A specific cost can be composed of a combination of cost components including direct labor hours, other direct costs, indirect labor hours, other indirect costs, and purchased price. However, the earned value management methodology, in some instances, the term cost can represent only labor hours without conversion to monetary worth, see also actual cost, AC, estimate. Cost type. A subdivision of the cost such as, direct cost, indirect cost, and fee. Cost component. A component of the cost such as, labor cost, equipment cost, and material cost. Crashing, technique. A specific type of project schedule compression technique performed by taking action to decrease the total project schedule duration after analyzing a number of alternatives to determine how to get the maximum schedule duration compression for the least additional cost. Typical approaches for crashing a schedule include reducing schedule activity durations and increasing the assignment of resources on schedule activities. Criteria. Standards, rules, or tests on which a judgment or decision can be based, or by which a product, service, result, or process can be evaluated. Critical activity. Any schedule activity on a critical path in a project schedule. Determined by using the critical path method. Although some activities are critical, in the dictionary sense, without being on the critical path, this meaning is seldom used in a project context. Critical chain method, technique. A schedule network analysis technique that modifies the project schedule to account for limited resources. The critical chain method mixes deterministic and probabilistic approaches to schedule network analysis. Critical path. Generally, but not always, the sequence of schedule activities that determines the duration of the project. Generally, it is the longest path through the project. However, a critical path can end, as an example, on a schedule milestone that is in the middle of the project schedule and that finish no later than imposed date schedule constraint. See also project critical path, specified critical path, and critical path method. Critical path method, CPM, technique. A schedule network analysis technique used to determine the amount of scheduling flexibility, the amount of float, on various logical network paths in the project schedule network, and to determine the minimum total project duration. Early start and finish dates are calculated by means of a forward pass, using a specified start date. Late start and finish dates are calculated by means of a backward pass, starting from specified completion date, which sometimes is the project early finish date determined during the forward pass calculation. See also critical path. Current finish date. The current estimate of the point in time when a schedule activity will be completed, where the estimate reflects any reported work progress. See also scheduled finish date, activity current finish date, and project current finish date. Current start date. The current estimate of the point in time when a schedule activity will begin, where the estimate reflects any reported work progress. See also scheduled start date and baseline start date, activity current start date, and project current start date. Customer. The person or organization that will use the project's product or service or result. Data date, DD. The date through which the project status and progress were last determined and reported for analyses, such as scheduling and performance measurements. It is the last past historical date. Sometimes called as of date. Data date line. Vertical line from top to bottom of a graphical report such as a bar chart showing the data date in relationship to the timescale in bars. Date. A term representing the day, month, and year of a calendar, and, in some instances, the time of day. Decomposition, technique. A planning technique that subdivides the project scope and project deliverables into smaller, more manageable components, until the project work, associated with accomplishing the project scope and providing the deliverables, is defined in sufficient detail to support executing, monitoring, and controlling the work. Deliverable, output/input. Any unique and verifiable product, result, or capability to perform a service that must be produced to complete a process, phase, or project. Often used more narrowly in reference to an external deliverable, which is a deliverable that is subject to approval by the project sponsor or customer. See also product, result, service. Discipline. A field of work requiring specific knowledge and that has a set of rules governing work conduct, for example, mechanical engineering, computer programming, cost estimating, etc. Document. A medium and the information recorded thereon, that generally has permanence and can be read by a person or a machine. Examples include project management plans, specifications, procedures, studies, and manuals. Driving resources. Resources that are considered to have a direct impact on activity duration during resource leveling. Duration, du or dur. The total number of work periods, not including holidays or other non-working periods, required to complete a schedule activity or work breakdown structure component or project. Usually expressed as work hours, work days or work weeks. Sometimes incorrectly equated with elapsed time. Contrast with effort. See also activity duration and project duration. Early finish date, F. In the critical path method, the earliest possible point in time on which the uncompleted portions of a schedule activity, or the project, can finish, based on the schedule network logic, the data date, and any schedule constraints. Early finish dates can change as the project progresses and as changes are made to the project management plan. See also activity early finish date and project early finish date. Early start date, S. In the critical path method, the earliest possible point in time on which the uncompleted portions of a schedule activity, or the project can start, based on the schedule network logic, the data date, and any schedule constraints. Early start dates can change as the project progresses and as changes are made to the project management plan. See also Activity Early Start Date and Project Early Start Date. Earned Value, EV. The value of work performed expressed in terms of the approved budget assigned to that work for a schedule activity or work breakdown structure component. Also referred to as the budgeted cost of work performed, BCWP. Earned Value Technique, EVT, technique. A specific technique for measuring the performance of work for a work breakdown structure component, control account, or project. Also referred to as the earning rules and crediting method. See also Actual Cost, Estimate at Completion, EAC, and Estimate to Completion, EVC. Effort. The number of labor units required to complete a schedule activity or work breakdown structure component. Usually expressed as staff hours, staff days, or staff weeks. Contrast with duration. Enterprise. A company, business, firm, partnership, corporation, or governmental agency. Estimate, output/input. A quantitative assessment of the likely amount or outcome. Usually applied to project costs, resources, effort, and durations and is usually preceded by a modifier, that is, preliminary, conceptual, feasibility, order of magnitude, definitive. It should always include some indication of accuracy, for example, ±X%. Estimate at Completion, EAC, output/input. The expected total cost of a schedule activity, a work breakdown structure component, or the project when the defined scope of work will be completed. EC is equal to the actual cost, AC, plus the estimate to complete, ETC, for all of the remaining work. EC equals AC plus etc. The EC may be calculated based on performance to date or estimated by the project team based on other factors, in which case it is often referred to as the revised estimate. See also Earned Value Technique, EVT, Estimate to Complete, ETC. Estimate to Complete, ETC, output/input. The expected cost needed to complete all the remaining work for a schedule activity, work breakdown structure component, or the project. See also Earned Value Technique, EVT, Estimate at Completion, EAC. Fast Tracking Technique. A specific project schedule compression technique that changes network logic to overlap phases that would normally be done in sequence, such as the design phase and construction phase, or to perform schedule activities in parallel. Finish date. A point in time associated with a schedule activity's completion. Usually qualified by one of the following: actual, baseline, current, early, estimated, late, planned, scheduled, or target. Finish not earlier than. A schedule constraint placed on the schedule activity that affects when a schedule activity can be scheduled and is usually in the form of a fixed imposed date. A finish not earlier than constraint prevents the activity from being scheduled to finish earlier than the imposed date. Not earlier than constraints impact only the forward pass calculation and hence the early dates of a schedule activity. Finish not later than. A schedule constraint placed on the schedule activity that affects when a schedule activity can be scheduled and is usually in the form of a fixed imposed date. A finish not later than constraint prevents the activity from being scheduled to finish later than the imposed date. Not later than constraints impact only the backward pass calculation and hence the late dates of a schedule activity. Finish on. A schedule constraint placed on the schedule activity that affects when a schedule activity can be scheduled and is usually in the form of a fixed imposed date. A finish on constraint prevents the activity from being scheduled to finish earlier as well as later than the imposed date. Finish on constraints are a combination of a not earlier than and not later than constraints. These impact both the forward and the backward pass calculation and hence both early and late dates. This causes the schedule activity to have a zero total float while its predecessors and successors may have different total float values. Finish to finish, FF. The logical relationship where completion of work of the successor activity cannot finish until the completion of work of the predecessor activity. Finish to start, FS. The logical relationship where initiation of work of the successor activity depends upon the completion of work of the predecessor activity. See also logical relationship. Forecasts. Estimates or predictions of conditions and events in the project's future based on information and knowledge available at the time of the forecast. Forecasts are updated and reissued based on work performance information provided as the project is executed. The information is based on the project's past performance and expected future performance, and includes information that could impact the project in the future, such as estimate at completion and estimate to complete. Forward pass. The calculation of the early start and early finish dates for the uncompleted portions of all network activities. See also backward pass, schedule network analysis. Free float, FF. The amount of time that a schedule activity can be delayed without delaying the early start of any immediately following schedule activities. Graph. A visual graphical display using lines and shapes to represent data values, such as project status or forecast information. Imposed date. A fixed date imposed on a schedule activity or schedule milestone, usually in the form of a start no earlier than and finish no later than date. Input, process input. Any item, whether internal or external to the project that is required by a process before that process proceeds, may be an output from a predecessor process. Integrated. Interrelated, interconnected, interlocked, or meshed components blended and unified into a functioning or unified whole. Integrated change control process. The process of reviewing all change requests, approving changes, and controlling changes to deliverables and organizational process assets.